Shavua Tov. We're learning Mesilas Yesharim, the Path of the Just, and we're on chapter 15, and that's page 298 in the Art Scroll edition. So we're learning about the Midah of Precious, or abstinence. Precious is abstaining from things which are usually permitted. But we learned that there is the goal, one's goal in life should be spiritual in nature. Our goal is to come close to Hashem by performing the mitzvos. And we learned that everything in this world, every physical thing, can present a challenge to us to distract us from our goals. So we said that there is an advantage to be porish from things even when they are allowed. There's an advantage to distance ourselves even from things which are permitted. So we shouldn't spend the whole day eating food, even though the food we're eating is kosher, and there's nothing inherently wrong with eating kosher food. But if we're spending our whole day just eating and eating and eating, and that becomes a goal in life, then that's not something which is going to help us achieve our spiritual goals and help us achieve and succeed in the reason why we are here in this world. So we discussed different aspects of precious, how it relates to different parts of our lives. Now we're going to talk about the way to acquire precious. Someone who has these spiritual goals and wants to focus on spirituality, what is the proper way to acquire the mindset to avoid physicality? Hine. Haderech hamuvchar liknos es precious hu sheyistakel ha'adam begrius ta'anugos ha'olam hazeh u'prisusam mitzan atzmam. V'haros hagadolos shekarvos lehivali behem. The best way to acquire precious is to look at the pleasures in this world and realize their how low they are, and that there's nothing to them, and all of the evil which can come from them. In the end of the day, as the Ramchal is going to explain, physical pleasures in this world, they last, as we all know, they last for a few moments and then they're gone. And we don't have any true satisfaction in the end from them. And when we internalize that idea, that will inspire us to not want to go after it so much. I know every time that I'm on a diet, you're very hungry and you see some really good food. So you eat it, you can't help yourself, and it tastes good for about a couple minutes. And as soon as you're done, you regret it after. And you say, oh, why did I do that? What was the point? And then you regret it as soon as you're done. And I just read from Rabbi Dr. Twersky. He said the difference between a physical pleasure and a spiritual pleasure is, sometimes you do something physically, a physical pleasure, which you shouldn't do. He says it's enjoyable for a moment, and then you just regret it after. You regret it for a very, very long time. Where he says a spiritual enjoyment, let's say you do a chesed to help somebody that needs assistance, you expend a lot of effort to help another person in need. So while it might be difficult at first, the pleasure, the spiritual enjoyment and pleasure, and the way you'll feel good about yourself, that can even last a lifetime. So there's a very inherent difference between physical pleasures and spiritual pleasures. Kihine ma shemata hateva el tanugos ha'ele ad shitztarach kol kach koach v'tachbulos lahafrisha mahem hu pitoi ha'inayim haniftim b'mara hadvarim asher hu tov v'arev l'chayra. The reason that we go after physical pleasures is that our Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination, tries to entice us. And how does it do that? Through our eyes. We see something, we see some food that looks really, really good, and we build up all these fantasies how amazing this food is going to be. And it's very, very difficult to separate ourselves from that. And this is actually and this is really the reason for the first sin, Adam and Eve. When Eve ate from the fruit, like the Torah says, the woman saw that the fruit from the tree was good to eat, and it was a desire for her eyes, for the eyes, and she took from the fruit, and she ate it. So the first thing which leads us astray to go after physical pleasures is our eyes. Our eyes lead us astray. We see something that we think we want, and it just builds up in us that we want to engage in this physical pleasure, and most of it is fantasy. It's not even real, because we know, as whether we're talking about something which is totally forbidden or not, we're just standing outside McDonald's and we smell that bacon cheeseburger, it just smells so good, and we think, oh, it's going to be so good to eat it, and we go in and we eat it, and then after You enjoyed it for a minute. First of all, it wasn't as good as you thought it was going to be. That's usually what happens. Whatever physical pleasure is that we're talking about, you usually when you're imagining how it's going to be, it's usually much better when you're imagining than what it actually is. But right after, you feel guilty. You feel bad about it. And that's whether you're eating something which is prohibited or whether just overeating something which is permitted. So the eyes are what lead us astray. But when we internalize the idea that these pleasures are really just fake, and they don't last at all, and all the evil which can come from it, then for sure we're going to be disgusted by it and we're not going to want it at all. So it's the eyes which lead us astray, and that's a natural thing. Human beings are naturally drawn by physical pleasures. So the way we have to counter that is by internalizing the idea that physical pleasures are really fake. They do not last. We have momentary pleasure, momentary enjoyment, and then after it's just regret and it's just emptiness. Whereas spiritual pleasure is something which lasts forever. This is all a person needs to have in his mind. To recognize the weakness of these pleasures, the shikram, and their falsehood, until he will become disgusted by them, and it won't be hard to cast them away. The pleasure of eating, that is something which is we sense, which has very tangible. That's how you translate. Is there anything which which doesn't last, like eating? You only enjoy the food until it goes down your throat. After that, there's no more enjoyment. Once it goes into your intestines, you don't even remember it anymore. It's gone. So food has just like a second. People go crazy over food, like they just have to eat this amazing thing. Or people could think, oh, how could I ever keep kosher? I won't be able to eat this anymore, or eat that anymore. But if you think about it, what is it really? Think about it rationally. It's a second momentary pleasure of swallowing something. He says, in the end of the day, you're going to be full whether you ate very fancy fatted up geese, which is a delicacy back in the day, or if you eat very cheap bread. In the end of the day, you look at the guy who ate the geese, and you look at the guy and he spent hundreds of dollars on his meal, versus the guy who ate very cheap whole wheat bread. They're both full at the end of the day. And then, so that's one thing, to realize that the pleasure of eating is only for a moment. But if you add to that, if you don't eat right, physically don't eat right, all of these sicknesses which can come from not eating right. People have to have I am of course guilty of this also, their fried chicken and their French fries and all the chocolates and everything. And you realize, and you think about it, that for that enjoyment, it could lead to very serious health concerns. And even not that, just feeling bloated after eating. And the different fumes or different ways that the food can interact with the body. If a person would think about it rationally, for sure he wouldn't do this. Since the goodness you get out of it is not good, and the evil is evil. So he says that if you really analyze eating food, for example, that's not healthy. So you think about it, you get enjoyment for about a second, and then you're going to feel bloated, and it's not good for your body. And I'm adding this, maybe you spent a lot of money on it, and it's not worth it. He's saying the benefit that you get from it isn't a real benefit, and the dangers are real. And all the other physical enjoyments are like this. Even if you think, yeah, well, I do get enjoyment for a little bit, well, that enjoyment's only for a brief moment. And he says that it's obvious that the benefit, the small benefit that a person has from eating these foods which is only for a moment, is definitely not worth it, that he should expose himself to the maladies and the bad things which could come from engaging with it. When a person internalizes this truth, then a person will distance himself from this foolishness that his body naturally desires. So the way we overcome our natural physical desire for these things is through our intellect, by contemplating and reinforcing intellectually these ideas that we've mentioned, that physical pleasures can damage us in certain situations, and also the benefit that we get from them is very brief. As yimas behem, when a person does that, he will be disgusted by them, and then he will only want to take from the physical world what is necessary. Just like contemplating on this, one will acquire precious. So too, by not contemplating it and being foolish in this way, he will lose the attribute of abstinence or precious. If you spend your time amongst the ministers and the great people that spend their whole day running after honor and hevel, emptiness, and you see their greatness, it's going to be impossible for us to avoid our natural physical desires for those things. A person is influenced by his environment, by his friends, by the city that he lives in. So if a person hangs out with people that just spend their whole day running after physical pleasures, then that person will also be will also start running after physical desires. And even if he conquers his Yetzer Hara, he will still have a constant battle. He's in danger. Even if you're a tough person and you say, yeah, my friends, they go after all their physical desires, but me, I can beat my Yetzer Hara. But the Ramchal says, very insightful point, even if you conquer your Yetzer Hara, you're still doing constant battle. The Eitzah, the advice the Ramchal is giving, is to save from the battle entirely. When a person realizes and internalizes within himself the lowliness of physical pleasures, then he won't even have so much of a battle. King Solomon said, Tov l'lechas al beis evel, melechas al beis hamishta. King Solomon said in Koheles and Ecclesiastes, it's better to go to a house of mourning than a house of celebration. Right? When a person goes to a wedding, he can get drunk, and he can, levity sometimes leads to sin. Whereas if a person goes to a house, it's still a mitzvah to go to a wedding in the proper way, but he's saying it's better to go to a house of mourning, because in a house of mourning, when people go to a funeral, they realize they're confronted with their own mortality, and it forces them to realize what's really important in life. The best thing, the most valuable thing, is contemplation. Hisbodedus. Ki kamoshe meser me'enav v'inyanei ha'olam, king ma'avir chamdasa melibo. When he removes from his eyes all of these physical things, he will remove his desires from his heart. Ukvar hiskir David HaMelech olav hashalom b'shavach hisbodedus. Va'amar, King David said regarding the importance of contemplation, Miyitin li ever kayona, hine archik nidar alin b'midbar sala. If I had the wings like a dove, I would go and sit in the desert. This is something that we unfortunately we're not able to do as much anymore, because we're always distracted by a million things. But it's very important to have some time, whether it's 10 minutes a day, to just sit and contemplate. Why am I here? What am I doing in this world? How can I achieve that goal? How did I do today? How can I do better tomorrow? To just sit and reinforce what is important to us in life. Because if we don't do that, then we don't stand a chance of being successful. V'hanavim, Eliyahu v'Elisha, Eliyahu the prophet and Elisha the prophet, they had specific places in the mountains where they would go and contemplate. Rav Aryeh Kaplan is a very interesting sefer about how contemplation was the first stage and meditation was the first stage that led to prophecy back in the day. And the sages went in their ways Ki matzanu lahem zeh ha'imtzayim hayoser muchan likno shleimus aprishos lama'an asher lo yivium hevlei chavreihem lahakbil gamhem kamaisam. So in order that the sages would not be enticed by the ways of the people around, they would sit and contemplate, because we are naturally drawn to physical pleasures. We are physical beings. So if we don't sit and contemplate and use our intellect to reinforce the negative aspects of physical pleasures, then we don't really stand a chance. That which we have to be careful in acquiring precious. This is something we mentioned a few weeks ago, that when acquiring precious, there are many, many levels. A person shouldn't just read this chapter and say, physical things are bad, and therefore I'm only going to have bread and water. That's a very bad thing to do. A person should not jump levels. It's important that whenever we're growing spiritually, we have to take step after step. So if there's, maybe a way to start is that if there's a certain delicacy somebody eats and spends a lot of money on, you should stop eating that specific delicacy, or whatever it is. Everybody's different, but the Ramchal is warning us that it's very important. He's saying it regarding precious, but it really applies everywhere we're growing spiritually, that we have to take it step by step, and we can't jump too much to one level. Today we should acquire one level, a small level, and tomorrow we'll add a little bit more, until it becomes second nature to us, and then it becomes like our nature. Okay, with that we finished the last chapter about precious. Next week, God willing, we'll start about Tara, about purity, acquiring the attribute of purity. But today we just learned that the way to weaken our desire for physical pleasures is to contemplate and realize intellectually that physicality, we get enjoyment for a moment, but it can lead to a lot of bad things which last a long time. And when we reinforce these ideas and we don't hang around people that spend their whole lives going after physical pleasures, then we are on the path to acquiring precious. And I wish everybody a very happy, healthy, holy week.